We will be discussing about the highly anticipated 2024 United States elections taking place, right now or today, which would be the 15th, rather, I beg your pardon, today, which will be the 5th of November, between, of course, the Democrat Party, which Kamala Harris, the Vice President, represents, and the Republican, which is Donald Trump. It is always important for us to understand, how international politics and election affects Nigerians. We have in the studio here with us Ambassador Haruna Ali Warkani. He is an analyst, international diplomat, an international affairs analyst to dissect, to this topic with us. Good morning, Ambassador.
Morning.
It's always a pleasure having you.
It's a pleasure being here once more.
All right. Also, we have someone from the research analyst at the Center for Democracy and Development, Afolabi Adekaiyaoja, joining us this morning as well. Good morning.
Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you. So let's start with you, Ambassador. First of all, this election came as the most tedious election, starting from the campaigns. It's the first time I was discussing it with someone that I said, these people go all out and beyond when it comes to election. The first time I'm hearing a lot of curses and insults, when it comes to campaign and all of that. And this is a country that a lot of developing countries look up to when it comes to development and that. So tell us your take on how, chaotic the campaigns has been.
Well, first and foremost, I think this can easily be described as the most epic campaign so far in the history of America, in the sense that this is the first time a woman candidate appeared from nowhere, unplanned for, and Donald Trump, who was also once upon a time President of America, was coming back onto the scene. So it's a combination that is very unique and never seen in the history of America. And therefore it presents an interesting platform for analysis, so to say, because you have Americans sharply divided amongst these candidates and the circumstances leading to what happened. And interestingly too, one of the contentious issues that came up as a result of this is the question of immigrants. America is a product of immigrants. Almost everyone except the Latinos are immigrants of Europe who came to America as a result of the gold rush. So nobody can claim to be an American, so to say, by nativity. Most of the Europeans, Germans, Italians, Spanish, English, just name it, they came to America from Europe. And therefore, all of them were actually illegal immigrants because nobody granted them visa, nobody granted them citizenship. They came and acquired citizenship in America. However, here you have Donald Trump, who was German by nature or nativity, father, grandfather, everything, and Kamala Harris, father Jamaican, mother Indian, contesting. And each one of them had to address the issue of immigrants in America. So if you are once an immigrant and you are asked to comment on or do or take any action on immigration, you see that it's quite an interesting issue.
Yeah.
The Latinos who own America are even silent. Nobody seems to care who they are anymore. They have become an appendage to American society in a way, people who have their land. Europeans came and exploited this land, and now it has become theirs. So in the affairs of things, Latinos are seen as just part of it. So now, Kamala Harris is seen to be very soft on immigration because she allowed immigrants some time ago when she had powers to come in by way of legislation. Donald Trump has been very, very hard on immigration. He had said he will deport everybody, even now.
Indeed. No, we know. I think that is the base of the Republican campaign, which is holding on to immigration. But then let's come back to you, Afolabi. Still on this campaign issues, I'm sure you have observed how everything has been going on. When it comes to the Democrats, one of the things that they were holding on to is the my body, that's the abortion, part. So while the far right are saying, we don't want this, the liberals are saying this, and Kamala Harris has given them that promise of that. So based on your take on this, would you say her own campaign strategy has been working for her?
I mean, I think one of the first realities which the ambassador has already referenced is the fact that it's a very divided country. So almost similar to Nigeria's elections last year, there's no single opinion or no single area that you can see that Americans really unite on. So both candidates have represented these different areas when it comes to the elections. When it comes to the campaign strategy, I think, first of all, there is some credit that we must give to the Democratic nominee because, first of all, like the ambassador also mentioned, she wasn't the original nominee. It was meant to be the incumbent president. So you're stepping into a position where you are the vice president to somebody who has essentially been forced out by his party, and you have to campaign while still making sure that you are your own candidate, while still serving dutifully to somebody who else is there. It's a very difficult line to manage, and credit to her, she's actually been able to do that quite well so far. But when it comes to the abortion issue, like you rightly mentioned, that's actually one area that Democrats have also been very smart at targeting. So historically, Republicans have been seen as the party of business, the party of the economy, where if you elect a Republican into office, then you're able to get more jobs, more trade, more capitalism going around. Democrats have not usually gotten that impression. They've been seen as the welfare state, the socialist to a degree, right? But then one thing that they picked up on during the last midterm elections was the abortion issue. So in the aftermath of when Trump nominates 3 conservative justices to the Supreme Court, and then their key votes in overturning Roe v. Wade, a very seminal judicial action that actually created and changed the way abortion is done in the U.S. Democrats were able to latch into that issue to the fact where when it came to the midterm elections, they were actually able to overperform the way presidents usually underperform during their first midterms in office. So Democrats found an issue. They have a woman who is now a nominee, and they were able to really highlight the fact that, look, beyond it just being an individual versus state issue, we'll make sure that it is a national issue. We'll actually make it bigger than it actually is. And they've been able to use that to divert some of the attention, some of the rage, especially in terms of the way America has dealt with the Israel-Palestine conflict, for example. So it's been a very effective strategy. It's been a very effective messenger as well. So it's something that they've actually been able to utilize effectively and make it as competitive as possible. Because one thing that we shouldn't forget is that as far back as when the debate between Biden and Trump took place, the election was done. Everybody felt very certain that Trump was coming back in. We are at election day right now, and nobody knows who's going to be president by the end of the day. It's still very tight, it's on knife's edge. That is credit to the way that she's been able to campaign and unite the party essentially.
Just within a few months. Yeah. All right. Let's talk about first of all the process of this election. America has always had this unique way, unlike other countries. So we do by popular vote, but then they are of using the electoral college, and it's still dicey. So for an average Nigerian to understand how other politics or how election happens outside Nigeria, just give us a layman version of what this electoral college is all about.
So the electoral college was essentially designed to ensure that even during the migration, even during the movement to larger states, that the original population structure, especially for the states that you perceive as smaller, are still protected. So if you want to know how the electoral college works, you see the number of representatives they have in the House of Reps, which is by population, and then the Senate, which is the same across, 2 per state, and you add them together, and then you now find each state's electoral college votes. So what that now shows you is that states like California, New York, Texas, that are a big, larger in population and have more representatives, will have a higher electoral college vote. But then that doesn't mean that states like like Nevada, Utah, states that are a bit smaller, Idaho, in terms of population, don't get carried along as well. What this now means is that you find parties trying to game the electoral college. Because what that means is that if you have parties that say, okay, fine, they're couple of these so-called small states, but they are reliable bankers in terms of their votes. If we work on them, then we have more states. And then you have Democrats who have historically been able to say, okay, fine, we can get the larger population states, the California, New York, Pennsylvania, and then that helps them to now increase the number. So usually what you now find is that there are some states that are reliably Republican, some states that are reliably Democrats, and then you have the swing states in the middle that tend to either, vacillate depending on the candidates of the election. So the Electoral College is not too far removed from our way, for example, of trying to put this application that if you are running for president, you have to have a quarter of the votes in 2/3 of the states. It's also a way of making sure that, as much as possible, citizens across the country can feel that whoever comes in cannot just come in without discounting, for example, parts of the entire country. You have to make sure that you are able to, appeal and to be as widely accepted as possible.
All right, Ambassador, let's go back to you. Talking about, the factors that would determine the outcome of this election. Based on your observation, what do you think these factors could be?
Okay. Well, elections in America generally has been between domestic and external matters. The two more or less weigh 50-50. No American president has ever been elected strictly on domestic matters that affect Americans. It's always been colored by what America is to the world. And therefore, the dominance of America on the international scene counts when elections take place. Therefore, the elections, as we can see, has been more or less sharply divided between what is happening in America, namely the economy, administration, and performance of the in-sitting government of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and its responses to international affairs, namely Ukraine, Gaza, and some other places, the Southeast Asian scenario that is developing. So essentially people are voting or will be voting based on their perceptions of how the administration of Joe Biden has performed externally, beside the economy at home, and what also is perceived as Donald Trump's position, assuming he becomes president by tomorrow. So these sharp divisions are there, and I think that has been one of the reasons why people have been a bit weak when it comes to maybe Kamala Harris' presidency, because of what Joe Biden has been able to do or not do properly. Because now Joe Biden is having to pay a price for his stance on Gaza, for his stance on Ukraine, and some other places. Now, Kamala Harris is inheriting this situation, which she didn't make, but she was part of the administration, and therefore she has to share in the nuances of what people are perceiving as if, okay, if you make Kamala Harris president tomorrow, what is going to be her take on the crisis in the Middle East largely, and then the Gaza, Lebanon, Iran, the Houthis down south, Saudi Arabia, etc., etc. So it's a complex mix of what is happening at home and what is expected to be abroad. And Trump, as we know, has become rather very strong, because when he was there before, everybody seemed to know what he did, and he has been very vocal as to what he can do. For instance, if he says if he was president, there would have been no war in Ukraine. That's a very powerful statement, because if the world takes what has been expended so far, lives, machinery, money, time, etc., etc., to wage war in Ukraine, which would have been avoided truly.
Yeah, hence the reason he has, a good large number of Arab Americans supporting him based on what is happening in Gaza and Israel, and the comments that he's made.
Very well.
Let's come back to Afolabi. Still on the factors that could affect the outcome. What other factors do you think, apart from what Ambassador has mentioned?
Well, I think Ambassador has already hit the nail on the head, especially in terms of the domestic issues that will play a very big role in how the election even comes out. I think one thing that's also very important is to look at the fact that this is still a very, very divided country, right? So we are looking at a situation where the rhetoric, like you rightly mentioned at the beginning of the program, has been quite incendiary. You have people openly calling other candidates fascists, or insulting them in different languages. But then also, I think what is very important is that there is a sense of almost the elite eating itself out. And I'll explain that. You have a former president who is coming back on the ballot, and that has already happened once, Grover Cleveland, and you have his former appointees, his former vice president, former cabinet officials who are openly campaigning against him, who have said that this man is not fit for office. You have Democrats as well who are trying to manage the issue of a fairly wide tent party. You have the far left as well, which, to be fair, has actually been quite vocal in terms of condemning President Biden for his policies in Gaza and on the Israel-Palestine conflict. And you also have the accusations that well, quite frankly, how did she get to the position where she is today? And also the very looming factor that she's a woman, she'll be the first woman president if she's elected. So it's still a very, very fraught issue, and I think that, as well as a very big issue that's playing a very big role in the election, is information disorder. So a lot of the rhetoric, especially if you're on Twitter or X with Elon Musk, has been around censorship. This sense that, okay, if we elect Kamala into office, then there won't be any free speech anymore. The government and the state will try to clamp down on these civil liberties, and the Republicans are saying that, well, they are the party of free speech and open, dialogue and conversation. But the question now comes down to what extent does that now infringe on my own personal rights? Just because I can insult you, and say what I want to say, does that make it free speech? So that's a very big issue that has been playing a very, very major role in the election. There's also the question about Harris being known for being a very strong regulator. So Harris, a former attorney, a former Attorney General of California, a senator, and now vice president. Many of the policies that she has either introduced or pushed forward have been either to strengthen government regulations. So you have a very strong group of people who are saying that, well, if I am quite wealthy, if I am the richer tax bracket, what does that mean in terms of my own wealth, in terms of my company's ability to actually function and be competitive on international scale? So domestically, there are still different questions in terms of how America wants to move forward and how it wants to be seen. And what we're seeing, especially over the last couple of years, is that this very divisive rhetoric has now splintered in and made it such that even when you have a discussion between parties that should really be about how the country now introspects and reflects going forward, it just boils down to just name calling and arguments, which is quite sad.
It is quite sad, honestly. We always say that we look up to these people when it comes to advancement, but it coming to that with the threat of life on Donald Trump, that was during the campaign, it has really gotten worse. But then the former president and candidates of the Republican Donald Trump also made some, there's been a question to him, which is, if at all this election happens and you happen not to win, would you accept the result? He said there is no way that he would accept the result if he does not win. It had to be rigged if it turns out that he does not win, because he's so sure of himself. Ambassador, tell us the implication of that statement, and what, do you have any fear of what would happen post-election, considering what happened in 2020?
Thank you. Very interesting part indeed in this conversation. Essentially, Donald Trump might not easily be described as a Democrat to the core, because yes, as we know, the last election and what happened, he has clearly shown that he wants to protect his votes, which he believes he owns without too much ado. Donald Trump sees himself a little above America, actually, if we can say. And therefore, he does not believe in what happened before and what is happening right now. Particularly, the attempts on his life clearly shows, yes, perhaps the basic principles of democracy has been set aside. And so for him, it's a battle that may not necessarily have to be with the tenets of democracy, so to say. And he is fighting vigorously to make sure, yes, he becomes president, because it's like a last chance. Can he still contest if he loses this? So it's like collecting something from a child it becomes very difficult. The reactions might necessarily be what we can expect. So, expecting whether he will accept a defeat quietly and go home back to his place might be difficult. And there are some Americans who are also in the same mindset with Donald Trump, willing and ready to challenge the system in so many respects if it doesn't really happen. The polls have also shown at a point in time that he might be the president. He might be the president. And that gives a kind of feeling, pumped up feeling to say we've already made it. The swing states and some other very contentious issues like the Muslim votes.
And also some large number of black men that are leaning towards Trump more than a woman ruling.
Very, very good. So the Muslim vote, which has become very contentious, and the black votes, even some Latinos, though feeling maybe they could be excluded from America, but they still believe somehow the Democrats have not played a role that they can be proud of necessarily. So you can see some groups emerging that are very, very strong. And we must not forget the National Rifle Association are still in the wings, waiting to see what might happen. They determine a lot of American politics, and so they are still there. And you can't discount them this time around.
Indeed. I mean, with everything going on, quickly, gentlemen, I want to round up with what this election, as in whatever the outcome might be, would be for Nigerians, because we've seen past precedents of America not really relating with Nigeria. I think Obama, for his 8 years, never visited Nigeria. During Trump, that was when former President Muhammadu Buhari went to visit him. He never visited Africa, the entire continent. And then Biden as well never visited Nigeria. So what do you think, whatever the outcome would be, would affect Nigeria and even Africa as a whole?
Well, I think just to go back to what you said earlier, a better example for us to even looking up to would be Botswana, where recently the Botswana, the ruling party for 58 years, lost the elections. The president conceded openly, lost quite quickly. So we are seeing that there are better examples of democracy closer to home. Even now, former President Jonathan, who conceded after 2015 without any of the, of the force of January 6th. But I think in terms of what happens for us in Nigeria, I mean, the very first caveat that I've been very loud about is the fact that we are not electing the president, right? So that means that the American president isn't working for Nigerians, it's working for Americans. So it's a case of us still being very mindful that the power and everything that we have to do to move forward is still in our hands. The issues that are likely to be very big under any president, whoever it is, will be issues around immigration, issues around security, even geopolitics. The fact that, like the ambassador mentioned, the conflicts in Ukraine and Israel still affects the way that Nigerians interact with foreign policy, or even just things around the economy, even things like the price of bread. So many of these things will play a very big role in how America's actions also affect things domestically. Historically, what many African countries have seen is that Republicans are good for business. So they tend not to apply the issues of human rights, and that sense of, okay, we'll give you aid, we'll give you trade if you're able to conform to certain particular precepts. But conversely, also for many Nigerians, especially those who are not in these rooms when these negotiations are happening, that's where they are able to rely on America to, at least put some more pressure on their governments to be able to force and make sure that these development issues go through. So ultimately, I think that despite the fact that there are many of these different issues that play a very big role, even geopolitics, with the 3 states that are living in ECOWAS, in January of next year, issues around climate, around development, there are quite a lot of issues that will play a very big role. But ultimately and fundamentally, I think that it would be very remiss for us to assume that whoever comes into office, whether it's Kamala, whether it's Trump, will be suddenly fantastic for the entire world or for Nigerians. At the end of the day, it still has to come back to Nigerians to make that concerted effort to push forward and to move forward and to grow, and it will only be Nigerians that can do that.
Indeed. All right, Ambassador, quickly, let's hear your take on that. As someone that has been a diplomat representing Nigeria outside the country, what is your take on how the outcome of the election would help the country?
Well, America will always be there, Nigeria will always be there. And relationships have been always kind of national interest. Now, America, whether is the Republicans or the Democrats, first is business, because that's what sustains America itself. And its relations with the world matters a lot because America depends on resources that comes from some of these countries, especially Africa. America has realized that the industries perhaps would be impossible to run in America without resources. There was a time when the business relationship between Africa, for instance, and America had been down. They were almost forgotten Africa if we ever existed. But realizing that the entire industrial resources, minerals, for instance, to run these industries, be it lithium, be it the manganese and chromium, cobalt, and the rest of them that goes into real manufacturing of particularly armaments. Their aircrafts, the industrial, military industrial complex stands strictly based on minerals that are available in Africa, makes them to rethink their position. And therefore you can see that China, Russia, Turkey, and India have come to take over almost the mining of resources here in Africa. And this has given America a kind of feel that, oh boy, something needs to be done. Yeah. So now there's a defining relationship between us that they must engage Africa more to protect their interest in these resources.
Okay. Well, due to time, gentlemen, we cannot continue. We have to put a stop to this, but appreciate you for coming. We'll just have to wait and see how today's election pan out, and hopefully we'll get to have a post-election discussion. Thank you so much for joining us, Afolabi. Really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Also, Ambassador Haruna Warkani, appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
And with that, viewers, we have come to the end of today's program. Due to time, we could not take a newspaper, so make sure you grab a copy to know what is happening in your country and even beyond. I am Summayya Abubakar. Do have a lovely Tuesday.